What's up, guys, and welcome to Powerline Podcast. My name is Ryan Lucas. If you're looking for this show outside of YouTube, you can find it on all major podcast platforms like iTunes, Google, Stitcher, Spotify. It's on all of those. Just search Powerline Podcast. Before we get into this episode, don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell. Thanks, guys. This week's episode is with a lineman named Caleb Thompson. Fantastic episode. I enjoyed the heck out of this conversation and learned a ton from it. I hope you do too. Let's jump into it.
Caleb, welcome to Powerline Podcast. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to hang out with us for an hour or so and share some of your wisdom and knowledge. So thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Cool, man. Well, let's get going in this. This meeting has been a long time in the making. I know Brady told me about yourself and about what he's got going on a little bit there with Thompson a while ago, and we've been trying to connect and make this happen for a while. So I'm stoked to get into it today.
Yeah. Let's. And Brady's been a fantastic addition to the team. We'll start by saying that.
Oh, he's awesome. I enjoy every conversation
Absolutely.
with Brady. I don't have a ton of conversations with him, but talked to him a handful of times. But every time he's just super enthusiastic about line work, about electricity, about history, about everything. Like you can just talk to that guy for hours and feel really comfortable.
He is. Yeah, absolutely. He's an open encyclopedia for sure. The man knows more than I think most people have forgotten. You know.
True story. So let's start with a little bit. Let's go way back. Like, where did you grow up and where are you from?
I actually grew up right on the East Coast in Cecil County, Maryland, and it's about 2 hours from the Eastern Shore, maybe an hour and a half. So you drive, pretty quick drive to get to Ocean City, Maryland. I don't know if you ever heard about that. Kind of near Atlantic City, New Jersey.
I've heard of Ocean City. Like most of the cities and places in the U.S., like a guy hears them just from movies and things like that. Like,
yeah.
So I got to get a general understanding of where it's located. What's it like? What's it like in Maryland? What's growing up in Maryland like?
I thought it was great. You know, where I grew up right at the mouth where the Susquehanna River empties into the Chesapeake Bay. Okay. So right on that waterfront, you know, it's green, plenty of trees, creeks. I mean, it was a great childhood, a lot of woods to play in. I was always interested in electricity. So as a kid, was always finding little transformers to play with and, you know.
So even as a kid?
As a kid, yes. I knew.
What did mom and dad do?
My mom and dad were both counselors. And
cool.
So they worked as counselors until they retired.
Oh, wow. How did you find, it's a question I ask most linemen on the show, like how you found line work, how you found electricity. What was, like you say, as a kid, you're interested in this. How did this come about?
So when I was a child, maybe 8 or 9 years old, I found a furnace igniter transformer in an old closed down industrial building down the street. And I took it home and hooked it up and, you could hear it buzzing and was cautiously trying to poke at it with a screwdriver and it was drawing big arcs and I was in love since that day.
How old were you at that time?
8 or 9, somewhere.
So where did it go from there?
Trying to figure out how to touch that without it knocking me on my ass. So that took some time.
Yeah, we're not recommending this for 8 or 9 year olds to go mess around with transformers.
No, and it was a matter of I eventually figured out that if I put my dad's rain boots on, with my shoes on inside of them, I could touch one side of that high voltage bushing real quick and hold on to it, and it wouldn't hurt me as long as I touched it fast. So, but I couldn't touch anything else. That I found that out the hard way, that I could only touch that. And, so I kind of gathered from that point that it's got to be something to do with standing on the ground or touching something else, like a bird on the line. So,
How did you come, like, I'm interested in this. How did you come up
Because
with like figuring out rain boots for insulating and that the whole ground
so
thing?
so I can tell you how, because my father always told me there was a lot of power lines where I grew up, and I grew up in a historic train town and a lot of low power lines. He always pointed up at the top of the pole and said, "Son, don't ever touch anything that falls down from up there. It's high voltage lines and they'll fry your ass." So I knew that that was high voltage, and I seen birds land on it, and they would be fine. And then I also knew that an extension cord you could plug into the wall and it wouldn't shock you. And the only thing I could come up with was that it had a rubber jacket on the outside. So I thought, well, rubber clearly has to be some kind of insulator, and if a bird can sit up there, it's has to be because he's not touching anything else. So if I put these boots on, I should be able to touch that bushing, and it worked.
You're a pretty thoughtful kid. When I was a kid, I was just banging two sticks together in the bush.
Well, yeah, it took a little bit for me to get up the nerve to touch it, but
Yeah.
once I touched it, and thank God it was a current limited transformer, because I touched other stuff
Yeah.
while touching that, and clearly lived. So
Where did that take you in school? Like just immediately interested in trying to figure this stuff out?
yeah, immediately interested in building Tesla coils. Um, I knew that I wanted to do something involving electricity when I got older. So in school, I joined, went right into Votech, of course, for electrical, and got a job with a local electrician before I had my license, and just kind of worked my way up from there. I ended up going to the apprenticeship program to get a journeyman's license for electrician, and worked at a bunch of different companies. And it was by accident that I found line work, and it was just by chance I was on a job where I needed to work with the power company, and I was asking them, and they said, "Oh, the line department's hiring." So I applied and got the job.
So as an electrician, what did you really realize, like what the line side entailed, what the high voltage side entailed, or were you a little more focused on the electrical side, the low voltage side?
So I was focused on the low voltage side, but I was really into transformers, um,
Mm,
and stuff of that nature. I knew there was a high voltage side. I just didn't know how similar or unsimilar it was to what I was doing. Um, and the electrician, even though I did enjoy it, and I set out to be as good as I could be at it, it wasn't what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. I knew that I wanted to get into something that was more technical or more exciting. Like, my idea of a lineman was to fly on a helicopter and get lowered onto the transmission, and bond onto it and crawl out there, 90 feet off the ground and make a repair.
yeah.
That was more on lines of what I wanted to do. But I got into distribution and loved it.
Right. Did you get the opportunity to do some of that stuff, like bare hand work?
I never did. I
Mm,
never got into transmission. And in fact, at one point I tried to transfer into the transmission department, but I would have had to, it was such a big change, and I never ruled it out. But they ended up squashing the whole idea because there wasn't enough guys in the shop at the time to be able to lose the amount of people that they wanted for transmission.
right.
And that was like,
It's always political.
it is. And that was further on in my career too. I wasn't an apprentice anymore when that came about. And I saw an opportunity and I thought, well, I'm going to jump on it. And, it didn't come through.
What was that transition like from, it's because I do get this quite a bit in DMs and social media, and quite a few conversations about transitioning from being an electrician to being a lineman. And this would be a good piece of content for people. Like what was that transition like decision wise, and then the actual move? Is there any advice in there that you could give?
So decision wise, it was not even a thought. Like, decision wise, yes, I want to be a lineman. I don't care what I have to go through to get there. That's what I want to do. But I realized that as I started switching over, that I thought that all the codes and knowledge that you have to have about pipe size and derating wire and amperages and all this just went right out the window. And it's like it's in one aspect you dumb it down a little bit, but it's not entirely, because the safety aspect is so much higher that it makes the job more difficult. Because in electrical, I can work in a junction box with bare hands and get shocked and throw the wire nut across the room and trip the breaker, and everybody laughs at you, and you go home and eat dinner with your family. In line work, that's just not the case a lot of times. You're burnt, you're injured for life. And so I think that the biggest change was the rigging. That's something that you never, as somebody who's not a lineman, would ever think about, like how much of that job is involved in rigging. And that's also very dangerous. But it was very exciting. I mean, compared to anything I did as an electrician, climbing school was probably, for some of the guys, was the most miserable thing in their life. For me, it was the most exciting thing I've ever done. I mean, it was incredible. I've always loved adrenaline. I love heights. I'm a rock climber, and getting up there and climbing up and down, and it was a great time. I mean, that was before the buck squeeze, of course. So free climbing and climbing out on the arms and on all that stuff. I mean, I thought it was incredible.
Yeah. Very similar in that way. And you should come to British Columbia and go ice climbing with me.
Hey, you like ice climbing?
Yeah.
I do ice climbing, not nearly as much as rock climbing, but I've done it quite a bit, like Catskills and Adirondacks. And
oh, cool.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
mainly
I should come down and go with you then. I only get out about 3-4 times a year max in the winter. I still got to travel, and it's like one of those sports you got to find somebody that you really trust, just like line work. Find somebody you trust to go with. There's lots of forums and people that you can go with around here, but some of them are sketchy. And
that's it, man. Last year I went and it was all rotten ice, but we climbed anyway.
Yeah.
Hiked all the way down and traversed down in this canyon, and I'm like, we're climbing.
Yeah.
So
cool.
It's always the ice screws are what gets you in those situations on the rotten ice. You just know that ice screw is not going to hold. It's just not. It
puckers you up for sure.
Yeah.
You put a few extras in as you go too. You only go 5 feet instead of 15.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, back to transitioning from electrician to lineman. A lot of electricians will text me, DM me. The last question's like, do you think my schooling will account for all the line school side of it? And I'm like, no. Well, they're like, well, how come? I've been an electrician for 10 years. How come it doesn't transition or transfer? I'm like, cause the same thing that you said, it's totally different, man. Like
it makes it harder.
Yeah. Like you'll have no problem with the electrical theory side of it, but it's just such a small piece of line work. Like you said, line work is probably 95% rigging versus the electrical theory side of it. Even on the electrical theory side of it, it's like, you can almost just form habits around wiring transformers and get away with it, right? Like,
yes,
you do need to know the theory, but you can get away with a lot without.
Whereas, you don't have to know the theory.
Yeah.
You're right about that. You should know it. You should know the theory, but you can make it on a lineman for 40 years in this industry and never know electrical theory and be fine. And it makes it harder. I will say that. Being an electrician coming in here makes it harder, because when you're sitting in class and they're teaching, you want to, no, I got the answer. No, that's not right. It's this, as in triplex. We used the tension wire, the wire that holds the wires up as a current carrying conductor as the neutral. And that's a no-no in electrical. And the electrician, you would never do that. That would be your ground. It's just every little thing that you think you know is wrong. Throw it out the window. That's what they kept telling me. Throw that out the window. It's wrong. So I think that knowing that electrical and having to keep your mouth shut and not being able to use that to your advantage, you come in with a chip on your shoulder and then you get beat down real quick. So, I would never tell somebody who was an electrician not to be a lineman, because I think it's the greatest thing on earth. There's no better job, but be prepared for that.
I've found a couple things. I found most linemen that I know that are formerly electricians are actually the guys I really want to spend a lot of time around. They're incredibly knowledgeable. They're very well-rounded. As long as they stay with some level of humility and especially coming into it, like, don't come into the classroom being that guy that shoots the hand up every 5 seconds and wants to tell the teacher how it is. Cause you'll get shot down because 99% of the class is not even at anything to do with that level, but they'll kick your ass in the pole yard.
Absolutely. They will kick your ass in the pole yard. And the class did many climbs because of my mouth and training. It was okay with me.
Yeah, that's all right. It adds some level of competition, and it makes everyone else in the class up their game a little bit too. So it's okay in little pieces, but
right.
So you spent a lot of the first part of your career, or majority of your career, in distribution, or have you been able to migrate to some transmission work?
It's all mainly been distribution, and the transmission work has only been what I've read, watched, and studied.
That's
So, distribution, we would glove up to 25 kV and hot stick 34, and anything over 34, we just didn't work.
Roger. If you stuck around your local area, like, you still from Maryland, you still in that area?
Mm-hmm.
Or yeah.
Yep. Still in Cecil County.
How has, obviously we talked a little bit before, and you mentioned that you're in a foreman role, like a working foreman role. Is that right? Is that correct? What's transitioning into a leadership position been like for you? Was that an easy thing to morph into, or is that?
It was because as I became a journeyman, I was interested in running jobs and taking the bull by the horns and, trying to take the lead whenever I could, and practicing all of that and picking up the clearance orders and the restrictions and lockout, tag out, and getting involved with all that. So I started on a lot of that early on. And as I became a journeyman, and then it got to the point where, as we were shorthanded, I started on it more and more. And then it was, I was temporarily assigned, permanently almost, as a crew leader. So then when the job openings opened up, it was, a shoe-in. I went right in, and nothing really changed. And what's changed now was, on top of, so that was an easy transition, becoming a lead lineman, because I was already filling that role a lot. Now we do a lot of stuff now where I'm actually in the office. I apply for the clearance orders and the restrictions and missed utilities and permits and this and that, make sure the material's all ready to go. And then, but I'm also out in the field a lot too, especially in storms and night shift and stuff like that.
How do you like that that transition to office? Like, I know so many guys, they hesitate to make that transition. It almost seems like something you naturally progress towards if you're any sort of a leader. You progress further and further into that position, and it just slowly sucks you out of the field.
It does. That's
Is that hard for you? What's that like for you?
so it is hard. And it's been a couple years, and it has slowly sucked me out of the field. But the excellent part with me is that I'm still a union member. I will never transfer over, for just for a few reasons, but mainly if I wanted to go back out in the field and stopped on that, I could. So I'm not stuck in any position, and that gives me a lot of it takes a lot of the pressure off.
Right.
Because I kind of can bounce back and forth. And not that I do too much, but, I think that as a leader, the picking up the clearance orders and restrictions and doing all that stuff is good. It only helps to make you better. And continuing to get out in the field and work alongside of that is, to me, the ultimate job. So that's kind of where I am with it, and I'd like to stay that way. And I don't plan on making any changes, as long as I stay working.
I think companies can use, because I've done a bit of both. That's why it interests me, because you get a lot of guys that give a ton of resistance to going into that position. They just absolutely don't want to be a part of that. And then you get some like yourself and myself that will test it out, and we'll go into it, and we'll put a foot into it. But I like what you said about keeping your options there, like not coming out of the union completely. I did that, and I'm back because, and I would never recommend that for anybody coming completely out of the union to go into management, and then just keep your options open. That is that it keeps your ability to go back to the thing that you really love and that you started doing. It keeps that option always there, which is a good thing. And then the other thing that it does is it keeps the pipeline open between the office and the strictly management or executive staff, whatever. It keeps that pipe open to the field. Like, you're the guy that's keeping. So it's an important spot and position for communicating what's happening in the field to what's happening in the office, and then what's happening in the office to what's happening in the field. And it's an important position. And a lot of people don't take that responsibility head on. They, for whatever reason, they get sucked one way or the other, more for the guys or more for the office. It's a fine line to walk, and it's a tight rope to walk, but it's an important rope to walk, in my opinion.
So I will tell you that one of the benefits of me doing it is just what you said. So I do all the scheduling too. So I usually get in early, hour and a half early, and I look at what vacations or people calling out sick or whatever, and I make a schedule up and look at the jobs I have for that day and make sure they're ready to go. And then I go out and meet the guys and hand out the work. And because I'm not technically, I'm a union guy with those guys, they trust me, so they feel more comfortable speaking freely around me if they have an issue or if something's going on that I can possibly help out with, and maybe accommodate them in some way. And so, it gives a better relationship for us to be able to make a little bridge of working with management a little bit easier, because, historically that's been an issue across the board, that, the union and management just simply butt heads and don't get along. And, kind of having a middle person in there really helps that out a lot and makes it run a lot more smoothly.
It's almost like, probably similar to like your parents. I feel like you're almost a counselor in that position.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
It's and it is such a, like I was saying, such a fine, tight rope to walk, because it's really easy to lose trust either way. The guys at the bottom, or not the bottom, but the workers, the union guys could go, oh, you're just more for the company, you're more for management. Or, you know, if you're talking to management and telling them about the union guys, if you slip up and lose trust there at all, either direction, it's not going to be
Yep.
good. So it's an important role. And I think people just don't take it. Some guys do, but some guys don't take it as serious as they should.
It is difficult. It is a difficult position because, you know, as a trusted person, I cannot go in and divulge information, you know, either way, but I can kind of be a mediator, like, hey, you know, these guys we need to cool off a little bit on the work. It's too much. Let's back off a little bit, give the guys a break, you know, something like that, things like that I can help out with is mainly where it is.
What are some ways, actually, let's get into talking about how you got into these training units. I'm super curious about these, and want to spend some time on talking about that. So how did your career morph into training and get into these Thompson training units? Let's talk about that.
Yeah. So as I was coming up to the apprenticeship program and I went through my last class, I always did well. I have, you know, had a lot of knowledge, and I'm very interested in training. So one of the training managers down at the utility asked me if I'd like to come help out on the next class, which of course. So I got into training that way. Well, as I came up, you know, our training yard was completely de-energized, and I learned on a de-energized yard. And again, you know, as a young man coming up in this industry, you get a chip on your shoulders, you're making all kinds of buku dollars, and your head swells up a little bit and you start getting that ego. And I went out in the field, and this was probably 2007, and it was the first time that I worked primary in a bucket. And we were doing switch maintenance on 25 kV, and it was just got through snow and it was damp out. And the 477, for whatever reason, was H-tapped to the primary. The tap gone down to the switch. And it was a normally open switch, so we were going to lift those taps so we could operate the switch. Well, the lead lineman in the bucket took the tap out of the switch because it was H-tapped to the line, and handed me this 10-foot 14-4 tap and said, here, take that up there, boom up and tape it to the line. And when I grabbed that, and I touched that transformer as a kid, you know, but when I grabbed that, for whatever reason, it made every hair on my body stand up. My snap hook on my lanyard started shocking me in the back, and all the little metal hooks all over the harness everywhere were zapping me. And the strap on my sleeves across the back of my neck was just tearing me up. And like I said, it was damp out, just snowed. And I grabbed that thing and I went looking down at the pistol grip and afraid to let go of it and only hold it with one hand. And the lead lineman looked at me and said, if you're scared, say you're scared. I said, I'm scared. He started laughing. He said, it's all right. Just boom up there. You're going to be all right. And you know, we took care of it. And I thought, holy crap, there's got to be a better way to break into that besides, you know, on the job somewhere. There's got to be a better way. And talking to the training manager, who's now retired, down at the training facility, I said, hey, we got to energize this yard somehow safely. And that was when the first prototype unit came up. I built in my garage and used some dry cell transformers and some current reactors that I would have put on my Tesla coils, and you know, some relays, and it was all band-aided together, and took it in there, used some neon sign wire to run out of the unit up the pole, and worked like a charm. But you know, it wasn't anything sophisticated, but it did work. It energized the yard to about 18,000 volts, and was only about, it was at still a deadly level, but it was only about 300 milliamps.
Huh.
So
What kind of
you didn't have any arc
fail
length.
safes? What kind of fail safes were there on that? Was there
So
trips?
when you bumped it together, so I had it hooked up in series with a GFI that would give you 3 shots, just like a recloser, right? So if you bumped it together, it would go out and the horn go, and then it would re-energize. And if it was still together, it would just stay out. If you bumped it together again, you would get 3 chances and then it would go out and stay out. And, it was great. I mean, we loved it down there. The guys loved it. It gave them something to look forward to coming to training. Like, oh man, we get to finally glove primary. And, so it was a good thing. And we noticed right away that compared to the class that I came up in, out in the field secondaries, I mean, we went on something called a loop crew for a year where you'd go work on secondaries for a whole year, climbing in the backyards, replacing connections. I mean, everybody had pits on their hard hat and holes burned in their shirt and, chops blown up, presses blown up, just gloves all blackened from just blowing up. And when we made that first unit and put in there, the one I built in my garage, that class that went out had about 50% of that. And, you can't help but to think, we did a lot of secondaries down there in training. Is that one of the reasons?
Hmm.
You learn how good those plastic guards are on that press and why you put that little piece of rubber on the neutral when you're cutting stuff and why you do one at a time. You skin, press, tape, skin, press, tape, not skin, everything, press everything, blow everything up, and then, try to.
You're 100% right. And this is something I've been a big proponent of training and talking about training on the podcast because, you see like how much the military trains, for example. I know that's one extreme, they're going to war, but if you scale that back to us, like there's not a heavy enough importance put on training. And it's, if you do that before you actually go to do your job, if you're trained, it's simple mentality. If you're trained before you go to do the job, it's going to limit the accidents or potential accidents you could have doing it. And training on as close to real live scenarios, training on closer to real life scenarios as you can is always going to be better. I remember taking bare hand training as well, and you could go up and do, you can go up and bond onto a de-energized wire and pretend all you want. That's good in the beginning when you're learning how to do the steps and bond on, bond off, and like you have the certain steps you got to go through. But when you actually want to drill real life action, it's a lot different when that thing's buzzing and you're part of that circuit. And it's like, if you go outside of your limits of approach, you're, first aid kit's a dustpan and a broom. Like it's a lot different way you treat that thing and treat that job that you're doing. So, big deal.
So, yeah. And, that's how it just kind of morphed from there, man. We used that system for a number of years, probably 5 years religiously. And I mean, we built another one, and the second one I built, the box wasn't big enough. So sometimes when you energized it, the whole thing, the inside of the box, everything was too close to the whole inside of the box would flash over. And the box wasn't like a NEMA 4 rated box. So, it was just a little CT cabinet that had like holes in the bottom and in the sides. And when it flashed over, you'd see like flames blow out of it, and then it would energize and be good to go. It's good to go, boys. You had the first flash over, and so that worked. And then it came down to one day there was talk about the company possibly getting bought out by another company, and they wanted documentation. So they came down and said, hey, we need documentation on this. What does it do? And I'm like, well, I don't really know. It's about this. Well, I'm not signing off on that. The engineer Said, I'm not signing off on that. And then they made a decision, you're going to have to dismantle it and remove it. And I said, wait a minute, we're not going to go backwards in training here. We're going forward. Let's find a way forward. What do you need for us to be able to energize the yard? Well, it needs to be UL approved. It needs to be tested in a lab. It needs to have this, that, the transformers need to be designed, especially for training. Well, I mean, that's a stretch. Come on now. So luckily at the time, I had already started my business, Thompson Electrical and Aerial Services. And basically we're electricians, and we did some line work too. Well, my partner that I started the business with was an automation engineer, and he had another business that did some automation for fully automated factories. He built the computers that controlled like the robotic arms and stuff. So I kind of brought the idea to him, and I said, hey man, what do you think if he said, wow, that's a lot of work, man. That's such a small market. He said, well, let's look into the market. We looked into the United States, and 250 big utilities and thousands of contractors and training companies and this and that. I mean, the possibilities were endless. And he said, let's take a look into this. So we sat down and went over it, and I told him exactly I could handle the transformer part. I built transformers as a hobby for years, and all kinds of Tesla coils, like big ones, small ones, hand wound transformers, transformers using a common core, open frame transformers, enclosed transformers. So
your science fair projects must have been amazing.
They absolutely were.
Sorry to interrupt you. That would have been pretty cool to see.
Yeah, I used to bring Tesla coils to science fairs for as an adult, for kids, just to put on demonstrations. But what I did was I could find somebody that we can work with a manufacturer that we can get something built. And obviously my first thought was like transformer, like the neon sign transformers, but they didn't want anything to do with it. And we kind of wanted to keep it in America anyway. So he did. And this guy, my partner, is brilliant. I mean, he is a brilliant engineer, very, very smart. And so he came up with this SIL 3 rated system that would control my transformers that I would have built somewhere. And basically, I went through about 24 transformer manufacturers, and they were sending transformers and they weren't working the way I needed them. I needed specific parameters for these transformers, and it needed to be exact because, this is somebody's life on the line that's never worked primary before. So I wanted to make sure that they were as safe as we could possibly get them with the specific parameters that we put in. And I found the manufacturer out in California, and I worked with their engineer, and we went back and forth for about 6 months. And finally they built one, and it worked spot on. And so we had them send 2 more, and we built the prototype and tested it for another 6 months. And then I brought it back to the power company. I said, here it is, UL approved, SIL 3 rated. It's like 1 in 10 million chances of failing. And then even if it does fail, the transformers are incapable of producing fault current because they're about 100% impedance, right? So everything is foolproof here. And you can't have arc flash. The currents will stay below a level that's lethal. And the system as is will trip out if it reaches an overcurrent of a baseline over 1.5 milliamps. So it tells you what phase it's on, the magnitude of the current, how long it took to open, the milliseconds, the duration. It gives you everything on a touch screen where you can see all that information that it stores. And they said, well, we kind of decided we're going to go with this low voltage DC system. I said, what? No. You're going to at least look at this. You can bring it in, but we've already made our mind, but you can show us. So we brought it in. They took one look at it and said, how much? And that was it, and that's the thing I've noticed with it is, it's one of those things that you can talk about and explain, and it sounds cool, but when you see it in action, it's so, you can do things. Not that I would suggest this to any training facility, because the point is not to do those things, but you can do things with it that you would never be able to do in any other scenario. And it be totally fine. You're going to be all right. You're not going to get hurt. Like, one of the ways that we test each unit before it goes out is to do phase to phase faults, phase to ground faults, drop a phase on the ground, and do all kinds of different things to make sure that the PLCs are talking to the equipment right, or grabbing that information at the appropriate times and doing what it's supposed to do. And the SIL 3 level is rated for safety to protect life. So if one relay fails, there's two more to back it up. And the whole system, when you start it up, goes to a self-check, and it has these little icons on the screen that it's checking. It's checking the processors, the relays, and you can hear all the relays in there opening and closing, and it checks the voltage transducers and the current transducers, and it puts a little current on something to make sure it's reading right at a baseline. And then if all that stuff passes, an alarm will sound, and it'll say, reset global safety. And then you have to put a key in the unit, and you turn it, and then it says it's ready to go. Each circuit has a key fob. You can stick a key in, you can turn that, and then that circuit's ready. You push the energize button, and away it goes. And when it energizes, what it does is it quickly reads the yard, what's on that circuit, how many transformers, and it takes a baseline. Say there's 3 transformers out there on that circuit, and it has a baseline of 30 milliamps. It would, create to energize all that. Then it puts your trip setting at 31.5 milliamps, and it rechecks that every 15 seconds, because as the day warms up or gets colder, the wind blows. I mean, the wind blows on the line creates current. So, very little. But as that goes up, if it doesn't recheck it, eventually it'll trip out. So that was one of the things in testing that we figured out, and it, it works really, really well. I wouldn't ever suggest somebody go up and grab phase to phase, but I've done it just to test the unit, and it's not the most pleasant feeling on earth, but it opens up right away, and you're fine.
That's amazing. So you can literally energize. How many circuits can you energize with the unit?
So there's all different types of circuits. Like some of the utilities right now have 6 circuit panels, and they literally have 6 circuits in their training yard, and everything. We have remote controls to control everything nowadays. So you can energize from anywhere in the yard, because this system has changed a lot through the years. We've learned from our mistakes, we've corrected them, and we've found ways to alleviate situations where the unit's going to be down and they're not going to be able to use it. But you can have a 1 circuit panel, or you could have a 9 circuit panel. I think the biggest ones that we've sold has been 6 circuit panels, and I don't think that there's really a need to go over that, because if you have 9 circuits, it's probably a huge yard, and you should just have 2 panels, one at one end and one at another. And it's like, just a little substation almost. And it goes up, and the transformer enclosures are handmade transformers, and they hang on a pole and feed the line. And there's a control and a power cord that feeds them.
That's super cool.
So conduit back to the main enclosure.
6 to 9 circuits, fully energized at what voltage? You can choose the voltage you want to energize them at?
Any voltage the utility wants.
And
Yep.
remote
And
remote
we have
control.
regulators that we can adjust. They're remote controlled too.
So if you
Everything's
trip,
remote controlled.
if you're training in the yard and you trip the circuit, you can just remote control it from where your instructor can remote control it from where he is. Doesn't have to walk all the way
Yep.
back to the station and flick a switch. That is
Correct.
sweet.
He can just push he can push reset. You have to push reset first. So it's got to be safety rated. So you can't just push one button and accidentally energize the yard. So there's a reset that you have to go through, and then you can re-energize it. Or he can go back to the yard, take the key out, put it in the reset position, turn it, and then re-energize it. And you need the key on the enclosure so anybody can't just walk up and what's this do? And it's all lockout, tag out too. So with that being said, when you turn the unit off, you can put lockout, tag out in a couple different spots and make it impossible to turn the unit on.
That's pretty cool. So you can even practice lockout, tag out procedures with the thing as well.
Yeah. And, I'll tell you, it's been everything that we've done has been engineered basically in-house. My partner has made all the installation manuals, and all the manuals have been written by him, and the drawings are in there, and it's hundreds of pages. So it's been a lot of work, and the team aspect of it is most important. My wife is like kind of a do-all person in the company, and she does everything from keep the books to answer phone calls, and she's even a sales rep, and she has built a lot of knowledge through this company. As the company's grown, she's grown with it, and she has a lot of relationships around the country with a lot of different training departments and utilities and training facilities and contractors. And Brady coming on, back to Brady, he's like God's gift to line work. I mean, seriously, the guy knows everybody, and he's so enthusiastic about everything he does. It's contagious. It really is. I mean, he has really brought the company to a new level of just getting around and meeting new people, and him and Jen together are a power team for sure.
I know just who you're talking about, like Brady, when you find those people that are super personable, easy to talk to, love talking about what they're passionate about, and can talk about it for hours, and you can fire any question at them and they can handle it and answer it. And if they can't answer it, they know 10 people who could, and they're happy to put you in touch with these 10 people. And just, such a good guy to have a part of your company for sure.
And I could tell you the biggest thing with him is when I find myself to be pretty knowledgeable in electric, and Brady will blow me out of the water on most things. I mean, it's incredible. We had an issue. He's one of those guys that, like you just said, you can have a bizarre issue and ask him, and he'll make a video with the description. It's too much to talk. Hold on, let me make this video. And he'll have a whiteboard drawing of what exactly is going on and draw some vectors in there. And one of the yards we started up out in Nevada, he was there for us the first 2 days with us, and then he had to push off and go to another job. That day that he left, we energized the underground, and I've never seen anything like this in my life. But the incident we had, we would energize the underground no matter if you put 7,200 volts into the primary or 8,000 volts into the primary or 4,000 volts, because we can adjust that. It would you'd get 150 volts out of the secondary, and you could test the primary. And I'm like, what in the world? This is the most bizarre thing. Could not figure it out. I called Brady, and he came up with this long solution in 3 minutes and told me exactly what the problem is. It's the combination of the run of cable the concentric, and then you have the high impedance transformers, and the fact that it's only using this, and I'm going, what? You
Amazing.
know, I looked it up, and sure enough, that's what the issue was. And I've only seen it once, and I haven't seen it again since then. But you know, it's incredible that you find these people through going to trade shows and stuff like that kind of fall into your life, that are able to help you in a lot of different ways.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a big part of the reason why I started the podcast, is like my contribution to the line trade and the industry and line work in general is helping people with stories like yourself or stories like Brady's, just our tribe, share their stories and get more people to hear these stories, because they're fascinating. Like how else do you get these things out but use these sorts of tools like podcasting and social media? Use them for good reasons, not just, posting what you did today, but actually, getting the stories out. And I think it's super cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think at the end of the day, my number one goal has always been, you know, to try and close that huge gap right now, of unexperienced linemen with the experienced linemen, because the biggest problem that I've seen since I've been in this industry is all the experience is leaving. It seems like the whole country went on a hiring freeze at the same time. And you get all the guys with 35, 40 years experience who have seen everything. They've seen and experienced so much, and they try to pass that on to us as best as possible. And then you got the guys like me who are seeming to be the more experienced guys these days with 15 years, where I've heard a lot and I've seen a lot, but I haven't seen it all. And a lot of the stuff that I know could happen is something that was told to me. And, as that leaves, you have me, 15 years, and then you have the guys under me, and then a new class under that, and a new class under that. And there's so much inexperience running around right now. And I just want this to be a safer industry for all of us. And, and again, back to Brady, he is absolutely shares that same passion in trying to make sure that we are all safe and we go home at the end of the day, and I think that's most important.
Yeah.
And that's what drives me in this business.
Yeah. 100%. Couple more questions. What's how many units do you have out in the world, and what's the response been like from people training on it?
So we have them. They're all over the country. I mean, I think that with the end of this year, there's going to be maybe 30,
Cool.
35 units running around out there. And next year is looking like it might double that. The response we've gotten has been nothing but positive. Everybody is stoked when they hear about it. They push hard to get it. They get it, and I haven't had any negative feedback to date. Everybody's loved it. I think one of the guys was talking the other day on a testimonial, and he said that he assumed when he got the Thompson training unit that people were going to be setting this thing off constantly, left and right, because of no matter how hard he pushed for them to take it serious down at the training yard, they wouldn't take it serious. And he said it was just the opposite. He got this training unit in, and the guys immediately tightened up their seriousness, their attitudes, their PPE, and just all around took it far more serious. And he said that it has absolutely changed the aspect of his training yard, and the product of the training turned out. The guys are coming out of training with a much better knowledge of what's going to happen if you don't put that little piece of rubber on there, or if you're energizing a big tap and you don't have good control over it,
Mhm.
you know, you're inevitably going to have an incident if you don't learn these things. And, you know, I think that the training yard is obviously the place to learn, to make the mistakes. You're making the mistakes in a controlled, safe environment. And that's what's important.
Yeah,
So
100%.
it's been positive.
That's awesome. Is there transmission? Can you energize the transmission voltages as well? Yeah.
We can. And the biggest holdback on that is that I haven't been, hold on a second.
Yep. No worries.
Haven't been very equipped to do transmission, because I've never done transmission, right? So we've had the capability, we've done a lot of testing, and then Brady came into the picture, and he has done transmission, and he helped us get right in line with exactly what needed to be done. And we do have a transmission unit, and we can energize up to 138,000.
Oh, that's wicked. That's really cool. That's going to be a game changer as well. Big time. Cool. I'm excited to see what the future holds for you guys. Is there anything else you wanted to make sure that we talked about that maybe I didn't bring up or you thought about as we were talking?
No, I think that we've covered most of it, you know.
Cool. Fantastic. So where can people find you, find these Thompson units, you know, talk to somebody about them, all that kind of good stuff?
Oh, obviously, if anybody knows Brady or Jen, that's the number one way. But ThompsonTraining.com. ThompsonTraining.com gives all the information, and you know, you can get in touch with somebody pretty quickly on there in the contact section. It gives a lot of company information and testimonials and stuff like that. But also on Facebook, you know, where Thompson Training is on Facebook, and we have a quick response time on there as well.
Cool. Well, thanks, Caleb, for being a part of this project, being a part of the podcast and coming on the show and sharing your story. It's super cool. I learned a lot from you today, and I'm excited, like I said, excited to see where this goes for you.
Yeah, I appreciate you having us.